Pokemon 151 is coming out in less than 3 weeks. I guess they knew we'd need something to help us get over the trauma they inflicted on us with Obsidian Flame, so this next set is coming quick, baby. By now, we've had a few days to look over every card in 151, so that means that I get to spend an evening making comically underinformed takes about what I think the best cards in the set are. Having a YouTube channel's fun this way sometimes. So here we go. Let's look at the top 10 cards in Pokemon 151. Let's kick things off this time with an honorable mention. We're actually going to look at 3 cards for the HM this time around, but they're all kind of similar, and I all think that they're going to see play in Standard almost certainly to some extent or another, but also they're not super impactful. What am I on about? Let's look at Charmander and Pidgey, and to a much lesser extent, Growlithe. These are all pretty strict upgrades to already existing basic Pokemon that people do play. I mean, obviously Charmander and Pidgey are both in Charizard EX. Pidgey is in a lot of decks beyond that. Sometimes people play Pidgey in the Chin-Pao EX decks, and again, beyond just that. People are playing Pidgey in all kinds of piles right now to get to that Pidgeot EX with a rare candy. As far as Growlithe goes, I guess this goes in the Growlithe or Arcanine EX deck that you get once you load up a client for the first time on your phone. So it's just an upgrade to the Growlithe that comes in that deck. So I think it's worth bringing up because every now and again, even on the ladder, you'll come up against that deck. So, I think it's worth adding to the conversation, but especially Charmander and Pidgey, these have more HP or better attacks, or in some cases both, than versions of Pokemon that are already legal to play in Standard. So these will see play, but again, they're not going to change the world. But let's slither on into the actual list here with Arbok EX at number 10. I have to kind of laugh at myself for this one, but let me explain it a little bit. Number 10 on my real lists are always going to be a little sleepery. Cards not too many people are talking about, but I kind of like for whatever reason and feel like I can justify to some extent. Now, we've already done like a whole top 10 sleepers for 151 video. If you're interested, check it out. Link in the description. If you watch it, I'll be very happy, but you don't have to. Just keep watching this video. We're doing fine right now. Now, Arbok EX here, I think perfectly personifies, or I guess it's not a person, Pokemonifies? The idea that I'm getting at here, right? My number 10 is always going to be sort of an extension of my sleepers list, and this is a card I just really like and I can't help myself. Arbok EX is a Stage 1 evolution with 270 HP and a retreat cost of 2. It's got its first attack for just 2 dark energy you bind down. That's 70 damage and during your opponent's next turn. Defending Pokemon can't retreat. That's fine. They have to work around that with escape ropes and switch effects, and it could be okay. But what I'm really interested in here is Menacing Fangs for triple dark energy. It's 150 damage. Your opponent discards 2 cards from their hand. Now, I like hand disruption, so I think we might actually have something here. Both attacks on this do something pretty cool. It works well with like Dark Patch and other sort of effects that let you just put dark energy on your Pokemon. There's a couple of them in the format right now. It also hits certain important Pokemon like Mew and Guardy for weakness, but notably doesn't quite kill either of them. That said, for a Pokemon like this that you don't have to rare candy to or anything, it's just the Stage 1, I think the stats are close to there. 150 damage isn't the most, but again, this discard effect could just be absolutely delicious right now. So I really like Arbok. I think that both attacks kind of combine to make a Pokemon that can do some interesting, frustrating things, and that's always stuff you have to look out for. So I really like it. By the way, fun fact, did you know that its name backwards is Pineapple? Little known tidbit there. Let's move on to number 9. It's Venusaur EX because I feel like I have to put it on the list so the comment section will come for me. This is a 340 HP Stage 2 EX with a retreat cost of freaking 4. It's kind of a lot, but it's got this ability, Tranquil Flower. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may heal 60 damage from one of your Pokemon. It's also got an attack here. It should. It's Pokemon Stage 2 EX. It ought to have an attack. For Grass, Colorless, that's 3 in all, you dangerous Toxwhip for 150 damage. The opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. Okay, so everybody says this is going to be great against the Charizard EX decks, but I have a few foibles there. Let me go ahead and argue against my own card on the list. The weird thing to do, but it's a good thought exercise. We should all be more willing to do that, I think. Don't worry, I will list positives soon. Now, as far as the negatives against Charizard EX specifically, it does 150 damage. That is not enough to knock out a Charizard EX. It'll still have 30 HP left over. Now, I guess you could say that when you say go, it's going to get a poison counter, or a damage counter from being poisoned. So it's at 310 HP now. And then if they don't switch it out for whatever reason, they can't figure out a way to do that, it has to hurt itself, so it can't hit on attacks, and then it has to still be poisoned, and take that last damage, in poison counters at the end of your opponent's turn. So theoretically, within a turn cycle, it can knock out a Charizard, but a lot has to go right for you, and I wouldn't count on all of those things happening. There's also the fact that it's glaringly weak to fire. Charizard's not fire, but a lot of the other cards in the deck are. Specifically, I've been playing Entei V, so that Arceus V has something else to put energy on whenever it attacks. So that's something nice to be able to do. But Entei V with a full enough bench, and even with a fairly not full bench, could still knock this out in the shot pretty easily. And there's the really real problem, actually, of Radiant Charizard, which can knock this out in a shot, especially late game. It's very easy to charge it up and do that. So that's just counterplay, though. There's nothing wrong with counterplay. It doesn't mean Venusaur EX is bad against the Charizard decks. They have a chance against it. I don't have a problem with that. I do think it's a strong-ish card against, all things dark, but especially Charizard decks. I think it is okay when fighting that one card. The ability to heal is great, even if they've taken a couple of prize, or you've taken a couple of prize cards. Charizard's attack isn't going to be knocking this out anytime soon. In the meantime, the between time, it can just be healing damage from itself every turn. This is like a form of steady body, right? The ability that makes your Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks. But this is like double steady body, you could argue, in a way. And you could also argue, again, this has like 400 plus HP in a lot of ways, and that is really, really tanky, So there are real upsides to this. It starts with 340, which isn't bad. It heals something every turn if it's inactive, and of course there's ways to heal something and then switch this out with a switch effect or an escape rope. You'll need those. The retreat cost is astronomical on this, but there are still tricks. It's not a bad little heal card in a format where we don't really like to play a lot of heal cards, especially if they're one and done, one use effect heal cards. This is a actually really good heal effect that can also attack. It actually seems really sweet to me. I do think this is a powerful card, but we'll see if it quite makes the grade. That's why it's number 9 on the list. I think it's worth making the list, but is it like number 4? Nah, I don't think so. But I have talked way too long about this card, so let's move on to Dodrio, or Dodrio, however you want to pronounce it. It's a Stage 1 single prizer with 100 HP and a retreat cost of just 1. Now, it does have Ballistic Beak for just a single colorless. That's 10 damage, and it does 30 more damage for each damage counter on the Pokemon. That is potentially a pretty hard hit, but as usual, you know me and most Pokemon players, I am interested in the ability Zooming Draw. Once during your turn, you may put a damage counter on the Pokemon. If you do, draw a card. So the ability synergizes with the attack in a really sweet way, right? If you just draw for 2-3 turns in a row and then throw it up there inactive, it's going to do 100 damage, something like that. So that actually isn't terrible for just a single colorless, but really it's just kind of the Bidoof, Bibarel, Squovit, sort of. There's a bunch of different Pokemon in Standard right now that can just effectively draw extra cards every turn. And although this isn't quite a Bibarel or anything, I do think it is in the conversation. I was going to say close to a Bibarel, but I'm not even sure that's an accurate statement. I will say that an extra damage or an extra card every single turn is a pretty powerful thing to do from the bench. It doesn't have to be inactive, in case you missed that. So extra card every turn for nothing. I mean, I have to run like a 2-2 line in my deck, which is a real cost, but I think it may be worth that cost. And there's even a point later on in the game where when this does have somehow like 80, 90 damage on it, it actually attacks for the moon. So sweet little card. Retreat cost is relatively low too. Not a whole lot of opportunity cost when it comes to putting the thing in the deck by the end of the day. So I think this thing might have a real chance. But let's look at number 7 here. It is Mew EX. Now, there's a chance this is too low on the list, and what I mean by that is it should be number 3 or something like that. I might be misjudging it, but it's still going to be on my list no matter what, even with a Mew that I think is better and going to continue to see play, like already in Standard. That's the one thing holding this card back for me, is that there is already a played Mew in Standard that is fan-freaking-tastic, and I'm not sure that this card's presence budges that Mew, kicks it out of the best deck in Standard, just won Worlds. So I'm not sure this card actually has much of a chance of seeing play, but it is an undeniably good card, I think, in a vacuum. So this is just a basic 180 HP Pokemon with no retreat cost whatsoever. It has the ability Restart. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 3 cards in your hand. Another Bibarelli kind of ability. That's pretty good. And then for triple colorless, you can do Genome Hacking. This is choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks, use it as this attacks, reminiscent of the Mew that's in Standard that lets you use one of your, Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks. But instead you're choosing one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks. Now this is very situational and dependent on what your opponent is doing, which is almost never great, but in the game of Pokemon, you have cards like, take a sip every time I say, in the game of Pokemon, but you can Boss's Orders. You can Escape Rope. You take a sip every time I say Boss's Orders or Escape Rope. I say those a lot too, honestly, because they're very good cards and they're great with Mew. Escape Rope, put Mew up there with the energy on it, of course, and then they have to make a real decision, It's like when you Escape Rope, they're going to put their Pokemon up first. So you put Mew up, do a thing, Boss's Orders, same basic principle. I want that attack, give me that guy, right? So that's also a little bit gross in combination with some cards that are already, in just about every deck in Standard anyway. So sweet attack and a sweet ability on a basic Pokemon. These are all very, very good things. That's kind of the trifecta right there. And you add in no retreat cost. Again, in a vacuum, the card is very good, but can it overcome the fact that there's already a very, very played Mew that just proved itself to be the best deck in Standard? Can it do that? I'm not sure. It might have to wait a little while for the other Mew to rotate. But at some point in its life cycle, I think this will be a very good card. Well, let's move on to number 6. It's Clefable. This is a Stage 1, 100 HP Pokemon with a retreat cost of 2, and the attack Follow Me for a single Psychic Energy. You switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So it's got kind of a Boss's Orders thing going on with this attack. That's kind of nice. But the thing that has put it on this list is the triple Psychic Energy More Moon attack. This just does 50 damage, but if your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by damage from this attack, you take an extra prize card. That may not look like much because it's only 50 damage, but that is unbelievably good. And it is my understanding this is already showing up in Japanese tournaments where this set has been legal for a little while already. So that should probably be at least a consideration. This is the only card I'm aware of from the set that is already being played in tournaments, so it should probably make the list for no other reason than that. But both of these attacks are pretty sweet. You can try and switch in something, especially if your opponent's low on cards, you don't think they have a switch effect or anything like that. You can switch in something with a relatively high retreat cost that's not energied up to kind of stall, and then even over a couple of turns, you might be able to just knock that thing out. Now, there's also obviously ways to just kind of stack damage up on a relatively big Pokemon, a V or even a V max if you can manage it right, and then knock out that same Mew V max with a Clefable at an opportune time and take 4 prize cards. Entirely possible, but even if you're just knocking out like a V or an EX, taking 3 prize cards off this attack is doable. I actually think that even though it's only 50 damage, there's plenty of ways with Radiant Alakazam, for instance, and other kind of tricks to make this actually work. So I'm a big fan of this, and I think there might be a real chance that once the set comes to the States, it just keeps doing work. But we are halfway through the list. Let's look at number 5. It is Cycling Road, a stadium card and a really strong one. Once during each player's turn, that player may discard a basic energy from their hand. If they do, that player draws a card. So I'm not going to freak out and say it's Radiant Greninja, it's Kirlia. It's not those things, especially Radiant Greninja and Kirlia really both create card advantage, right? You get rid of one, you draw 2. You're up on the exchange. That is really, really good. Let's just not do that. And I think I have to point that out. But I still want to say the card's kind of gonzo. The card's just kind of ridiculously powerful, especially in like Guardy decks and to a lesser extent, I guess, like Lunatone Soul Rock decks if you're just learning, But there are a bunch of decks that can take advantage of energy in their discard pile, right? Dark decks still have Dark Patch in the format for now, so they can easily use this and then Dark Patch and energy out. There's a lot of ways to make this work. And still, you can even play this with a Radiant Greninja in your deck. Copies, 2 and 3 maybe of a Radiant Greninja, sort of. So, I don't know. It's a neat card, but I also think it's a very, very strong card. And there's plenty of reasons why you might be wanting to throw energy in your discard pile anyway. But even if you're not, you have an overabundance of energy, then suddenly those cards look really, really appetizing. So, I think Cycling Road is a really solid stadium. Let's look at number 4 here, Giovanni's Charisma. This card has actually moved down a couple of slots. At one point, it was my number 2, but I just keep getting more realistic about it every day. That said, I do think this is really powerful and easy to set up, right? Charisma's a supporter. Put an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon into their hand. If you do, attach an energy card from your hand to your active Pokemon. So, little switcheroo, dinky-doo there. I kind of like that. You can set them back a turn, ramp yourself by a turn. That seems pretty neat, but of course, they have to have energy on their active Pokemon. That's actually not always going to happen. And of course, you have to have energy in your hand that you want to attach to your active. Again, that's not always going to happen either. So again, trying to be realistic about this, but two things. All right. First of all, this is just, again, in a vacuum, kind of obviously a powerful effect because Pokemon is a very sort of tempo-based game in a lot of ways. And setting your opponent back by a whole turn, in a way, ramping yourself by a whole turn, in a way, these are ridiculously powerful things to do, especially at the same time. So that's my actual technological assessment of the card, but also it's got Giovanni on it. That's my number 2. It's a Giovanni card, so I like it. Let's get into our top 3 here and take a look at Chansey. Just Chansey. She's just Chansey and we love her. It's 110 HP on a basic Pokemon with a retreat cost of 2. Now it does have this attack, Gentle Slap, 3 colorless, 470 damage. Who cares? The ability is Lucky Bonus. If you took this Pokemon as a face down prize card and your bench isn't full, before you put it into your hand, you may put it onto your bench and flip a coin. If heads, take one more prize card. I wasn't actually sure which card was better, Chansey or Clefable. I know that Clefable is the one that's seeing play, but I think Chansey is really, really, really good. Like any deck can play this regardless of what energy they're on, right? It combos really well with, what's her name, Peonia or something like that, the thing that lets you look at your prizes and you put them in your hand, you put cards from your hand into your prize cards. That seems like a pretty busted little combination right there, right? You do still have to win the flip. That's whatever, right? So I do admit that there are problems with the card, but I think that just sort of its genericness works in its favor an awful lot. The fact that any deck can play it. And the fact that, again, there's these kind of wombo combos with it, where if you can Peonia it or get it onto your bench somehow or another, or maybe you Hisui and Heavy Ball, you see it as an option in your prize cards, but you don't take it. You just know that it's there, right? Like that could work too. So I think there are some cool things that kind of synergize with this card pretty well in Standard that could actually push it through the roof, man. I like Chansey an awful lot. Also, for what it's worth, and I think it's worth, something, a tiny amount, if nothing else, absolutely adorable Chansey. Very cute, very kawaii. You did a great job on the art. Maybe that's what's charming me about it, but I still think this is a noteworthy card from the set. But let's move on to number 2, which is yet another basic, normal Pokemon that any deck can play. I tend to like those. And I tend to like my Dittos. This one is no different. This is just a basic 60 HP Pokemon with a treat cost of 1, and it's got a single colorless attack called Goo. A great name for an attack, but it only does 10 damage. That's bad. If you're using the attack, you're doing it wrong. It has an ability called Change Start. This ability can only be used if this Pokemon is in the active spot and only on your first turn. Search your deck for a basic Pokemon, except any Ditto. If you do, discard this Pokemon and all attached cards, put that Pokemon in its place, then shuffle your deck. What a sweet card right here, man. If you start off with this in your opening hand, you basically just get to have any Pokemon that's in your deck as your starter for that game. Nuts. Nutso to Butso, Banana Puddin' and Pie, man. That's a freaking good Pokemon card if I've ever seen one. I mean, name the number of games. Tell me, how many games have you wanted, I don't know, like Arceus V in your opener? How many games have you wanted Comfy in your opener, Lost Zone Box players? I'm not sure Lost Zone Box plays this card or anything, but just saying, how many times have you wanted a very specific Pokemon in your active spot on the first turn of the game? Ditto makes it so much easier. I think it might find a home here or there, and that is an understatement. Let's go ahead and get to that number 1 I was talking about. Said I can't help myself, never been more true than this, because I'm about to put a Stage 2 EX as number 1 on my list 2 sets in a row. I don't know what kind of brain disease I have, but I just can't get over Alakazam EX. I think there might be something wrong with me, but I also think I'm right and everybody else is wrong. This is of course I think that. This is a Stage 2 EX with 310 HP and a single energy retreat cost for 2 colorless energy. You can do that. You see, you can do that with a double turbo energy. You get Mind Jack for 90 damage. This attack does 30 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. But the cool one here is Dimensional Hand for 2 Psychic Energy, 120 damage. This attack can be used even if this Pokemon is on the bench. All right, let's discuss Mind Jack just briefly. If your opponent has a full bench, I believe this does 240 damage, 150 plus 90, right? It's 240. So at that point, if you have double turbo energy, it does 220, which is still a pretty important benchmark in this environment right now. 220 knocks out an awful lot of very important Pokemon. So I like that about it. You can do it with double turbo, a single energy to do that attack. That's pretty sweet if they have a full bench, and a lot of decks rely on a full bench right now. So I think that's a good attack right there. But Dimensional Hand, baby, that's where it's at. It's only 120 damage, but the fact that you can use it if Allie's on the bench, my goodness, man, it's so good. Your opponent might boss or escape rope and try to stall you or mess you up by putting something in the active that doesn't have any energy on it or something. And then, oh no, what's going to happen? I'm just going to keep attacking with Alakazam, knocking out like Sableye and Cramorants and like everything in between. There's a ton of stuff this can knock out. Like, you can still boss stuff up to the active and knock it out. That's totally fine. You can escape rope Alakazam away to the bench and still use its attack that turn if they make the mistake of putting something up there that Allie can knock out. Even if Allie can't knock it out, they're still going to knock out whatever meat stick you put up into active, and that might be easier said than done if you're playing the deck right. So the fact that it can attack from the bench is just like super busted. It looks absolutely cracked to me, and it comes with a decent attack aside from that too, the right amount of HP for a stage 2 EX. I know you got a rare candy to it if you really want to play it and all that stuff, and I don't love that about it, especially in a format where there's just better stuff to rare candy to 90% of the time. I don't like that it's weak to Charizard EX. I can admit the things that are wrong with the card, but at the same time, man, Dimensional Hand is only 2 energy to use. That is a super low amount of energy for an extremely frustrating attack. And at the top of it, you got Mind Jack. If it is in the active, oh, it's in the active now? Sure, I guess I'll just do 220, 240, whatever. So come on, man. I really got to hand it to this card. Even with some of the hoops you got to jump through to get it into play, I still think this is one of the better cards, if not the best card in the entire set. That's my top 10. There are some other noteworthy cards I didn't get to here, like Golem EX, which actually can do a fair amount of damage for only a single energy being attached. That's not bad. I think there might be something there. And then Blastoise EX, which does have steady body and a tanky amount of HP and synergizes pretty well with Chin-Pow in a lot of situations. So again, I think there might be something to this card too, but are you gonna run the Squirtle line in the deck? I'm not too sure about it, but it is still a big boy with a big attack for a relatively low amount of energy, and you got to point those out when you see them. But ultimately, that's all I've got for this one. We looked at a total of, 16 cards in this video, and this is a good set. Probably could have put 4 to 10 more cards on this list if I wanted to. So let me know what you're excited for from this set down there in the comments section. I'm excited to hear about it. There's a lot of stuff in this thing. Aside from that, just subscribe, keep subscribing. We just hit that 1,000 subscribers mark. That means we can start monetizing content on the channel now. That feels really good. We hit 1,000 subscribers super fast. So thanks everybody, everyone from the Magic channel that came over and subbed, but everybody that's not from the Magic channel, you'd never heard of me before. You just like my steez or whatever. I appreciate you guys subbing too. Thanks for everybody for stopping by and all that. You guys are great. So like the video, keep subbing, do all the stuff, links to the Patreon and stuff in the description. If you're interested, you don't have to do that. I'm just glad that you're here. But I guess I'm done for this one. So just let me know how you felt about it down there, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Spread love and be kind.